I want you to imagine, just for a second, that emotion isn't what you think it is.
Right.
Because we usually treat it like the weather, like, oh, I'm sad today because it's raining, or I'm happy because I just ate a really great burger.
Yeah. We treat it as something that happens to us.
Exactly. But what if that's completely wrong? What if emotion is actually a technology?
A technology.
Yeah, like a literal piece of high-powered machinery that you are actively supposed to be operating.
Well, that changes the whole game. Because, I mean, if it's a technology, then you need a manual.
You definitely need a manual.
And more importantly, you need a code of conduct for how to actually use it.
Right. And that brings us to the document we are doing a deep dive into today. It's called The Philosophy of Asar Amos.
Specifically, manuscript labeled MS-365.
Yeah, MS-365. Now, I have to be honest here. When I first looked at this, I thought, okay, 35 quotes. Is this just going to be like a breathless Instagram feed of inspirational sayings?
I can see why you'd think that.
But it is decidedly not that.
No, it is absolutely not. I would describe this text less as inspiration and more as architecture.
Architecture, I like that.
Yeah, it's really a metaphysical governance model for the self. The author, Asar Amos, is building a comprehensive system here.
Step by step.
Exactly. He treats the human internal world, so your mind, your spirit, your emotions, as a sovereign nation that literally requires a constitution to function.
That concept of governance is what really hooked me, because usually self-help is just about feeling better.
Right.
But this text seems to be about ruling better.
That's a great distinction.
Thanks. But before we get into the heavy stuff, and there is some really heavy stuff here, like ancestral portals and spiritual preaches, we really have to start with the foundation.
The physics of how the system works.
Right, the physics. So it starts with, quote, 1, which basically sets the ground rule for everything else.
The law of emotional reflection.
Yeah, he says the experiences of the day mirrors the entertained emotions of the day. Now I want to stop on that word, entertained.
It's a very deliberate word choice.
Because he's not talking about watching a movie, is he?
No, not at all. Think about the word in its older traditional sense. Like if you entertain a guest, what do you actually do?
You open the door.
Right. You open the door, you invite them in, you offer them a seat, maybe you give them a drink.
You give them residence in your space.
Exactly. Amos is saying we do this exact thing with emotions. We don't just feel them passively. We host them.
Okay, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second.
Sure.
Sometimes emotions just kick down the door. I mean, if I wake up with a massive knot of anxiety in my stomach, I didn't exactly send out a formal invitation for that.
Well, that's true. The initial knock on the door might be completely involuntary. But entertaining it is the decision to pull up a chair and listen to its story for 3 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. The text lays out a very specific chain reaction here. Emotion leads to perception, and perception leads to experience.
So if I let that anxiety sit on my couch...
Then your entire perception shifts.
Yeah.
The text actually uses the metaphor of the day being a polished surface.
Like a mirror.
Like a mirror. Right. So if you are hosting anxiety inside your psychic space, the polished surface of your day is just going to reflect reasons to be anxious back at you.
So I'll interpret a totally neutral email as aggressive.
Exactly. Or you'll see a normal traffic jam as a personal affront. You aren't actually experiencing objective reality anymore.
I'm just experiencing my own internal guest projected onto the walls.
Projected onto everything you do.
That is, honestly, that's exhausting to think about.
It is a lot of work.
Because if every emotion is a potential squatter I have to vet, isn't that just hypervigilance? I mean, how do we function if we have to be the bouncer at the club 24/7?
It's definitely active work. But the text argues that the alternative is much worse.
Letting anyone in.
Right. If you aren't the bouncer, then anyone gets in and wrecks the place. And later in the text around, quote, 20 and 22, he explains exactly why the stakes are so high.
Because he redefines emotion entirely.
He does. He calls it an unbound source of energy.
Yeah, he says it's the tool used by the divine architect to craft manifestation. Which, sounds very mystical.
It does.
But if we ground that, he's basically saying emotion is fuel.
Exactly. Fuel. It's high voltage electricity.
Right.
If you run that electricity through a machine designed to build a house, you get a house. But if you run it through a machine designed to tear things down, you just get rubble.
Because the emotion is just the current.
It's just the current. If you don't wield it, it wields you.
Which segues perfectly into the defense system. Because if you and I are walking around with nuclear reactors in our chests, we definitely need containment protocols.
Absolutely.
And the text identifies the biggest threat to this internal system as fear.
Quote 2 is fascinating here because it doesn't describe fear as an emotion.
No, it doesn't.
It describes it as a mechanic.
Huh.
It literally calls fear a fetter and a breach mechanism.
Breach mechanism. That sounds like cybersecurity.
Or siege warfare.
Yeah, siege warfare.
Uh,
The text says, fear breaks seals and opens portals to the inner sanctuary.
it's heavy spiritual warfare language.
So let's translate that for the skeptics tuning in. When he talks about breaking seals and opening portals, is he talking about, like, ghosts? Or is this something we can map to everyday psychology?
Think about the amygdala hijack.
Okay.
When you are in a state of profound unchecked fear, your executive function, the seal of your rationality basically, it shuts down,
It goes offline.
right? You lose access to your higher reasoning. That shutdown is a breach. And what comes through that portal once it's open?
Irrational narratives. Worst case scenarios.
Exactly. Paranoia. The text makes a really specific point about this connection between emotion and thought, too. It says thoughts are the degree of an emotion before being structured as a mental picture.
That part blew my mind a little bit.
It's critical to the whole system.
Because we tend to think we have a thought and then we get emotional about it. Like, I think I'm a failure, so then I feel sad.
But Amos reverses it completely. He
Yeah.
says the energy, so the raw sadness or fear comes first. It's totally raw.
And if you don't catch it there, it crystallizes.
It hardens into a sentence. I am a failure. And once it becomes a sentence, it is infinitely harder to evict from the house.
So the strategy is to intercept the intruder out in the driveway before he gets into the living room and starts rearranging the furniture.
Precisely. And that requires the watchman.
Which brings us to the D word.
Ah, yes.
Quote 3, discipline. Now, I have to admit, I kind of hate the word discipline.
A lot of people do.
It just reminds me of getting grounded when I was a kid. But this text seems to frame it very differently.
It does frame it differently. We usually view discipline as a punishment or a restriction, but Amos defines it as controlled action and the regulator.
The regulator.
Yeah. And later in quote 21, he uses this brilliant metaphor of the forge and the master craftsman. He talks about sharpening the tool.
I really like that image. Because a dull knife is actually way more dangerous than a sharp one.
Exactly.
You have to use more force and then you slip and cut yourself.
Right. And an emotional tool gets dull when we lose awareness of it. Sharpening is that interception we just talked about. It's somatic awareness.
Somatic meaning of the body.
Yes. So before you even think the full thought, my boss hates me, your stomach drops or your jaw tightens up.
That's the raw energy hitting you.
That is the raw energy. And discipline here isn't suppressing the feeling, is noticing that physical signal and saying, I am experiencing a fear response.
Just labeling it.
Right. Because if you catch it there, you can regulate it. You keep the tool sharp.
Yeah.
If you wait until you're spiraling at 2 a.m., the tool is completely dull.
Okay, so we have the energy source, which is emotion, and we have the containment walls, which is discipline.
Yep.
But here is where the text does a major pivot. Because you could have a really secure fortress that's completely empty inside.
Or worse, a secure fortress ruled by a tyrant.
Exactly. And that's the pivot in segment 3. Quote 6 drops a pretty big hammer. It says, even the wicked displays a degree of discipline.
Which is objectively true.
I mean, look at any supervillain in a movie or history. Highly disciplined. Very organized.
So discipline itself is neutral. It's just a mechanic of the system. To turn this internal governance into something life-affirming, you need an orientation.
You need a compass.
You need an alignment system. And Amos argues that alignment is love.
But again, we have to be careful with definitions here. He's not talking about romance.
No, not at all. He calls love civilizational architecture.
Civilizational architecture. That is such a grand way to phrase it.
Well, he views it as the intent behind life. It's the actual structural integrity that holds the universe together. And he connects this directly to a very specific ancient Kemetic concept called ma'at.
Ma'at. We see that word a lot in these types of philosophical texts. For the listener who isn't an Egyptologist, what are we actually talking about here? Is it just about being nice to people?
Far from it. Ma'at is often translated as truth, justice, and harmony. But in this context, I want you to think of it as cosmic order.
Cosmic order.
Yeah, it's like the laws of physics applied to morality. Gravity is a law, right? If you walk up a cliff, you fall.
You definitely fall.
Ma'at is the gravity of the spirit. If you act against truth, you fall. The text also mentions Ankuja Seneb, which means life, prosperity, health.
Which sounds like a really nice toast at a wedding.
It does, but Amos treats it as a conditional equation. You don't just automatically get life, prosperity, and health.
They aren't guaranteed.
No, they are the natural byproducts of aligning with Ma'at. So if your internal government is corrupt, if it lacks love, you simply cannot produce those fruits. the system crashes.
And this is where the why comes in for me. Like, why go through all this trouble to govern yourself? Why build the walls? Why sharpen the tools? Why align with Ma'at?
Right.
The text takes a hard left turn into ancestry here. It stops being just about you, the individual.
This is the concept of Sankofa in quotes 13 and 15. The text says you need to drink from your own essence.
Drinking from your own essence. It's very poetic, but help me land that. It sounds a bit solitary, to be honest.
It's actually the exact opposite of solitary. The essence, or the living water he refers to, is the ancestral stream. The text is arguing that you are not an isolated individual floating in a vacuum. You are a vessel teeming with the life of countless ancestral souls.
So my internal state, my anxiety, my discipline, my love, none of that is just my private business?
No, it isn't. You are the current guardian of an entire genetic and spiritual lineage. When the text talks about procreative light, it's not just about having biological children.
It's about legacy.
Exactly. It's legacy through consciousness.
Yes.
If your internal kingdom is a mess, you are actively polluting the stream for everyone coming after you, and you're dishonoring everyone who came before you.
Wow, that raises the stakes significantly.
It really does.
It's one thing to ruin your own day by entertaining a bad mood. It's another to think of your mind as a heritage site that you're just letting fall into disrepair.
That's a great way to put it. When you govern yourself properly, you are stabilizing the line. You are clearing the channel so that the wisdom of the past, that Sankofa retrieval process, can actually flow through you freely.
Okay, so we are building this temple for the ancestors. We're aligned with love. We have a discipline locked in. But, life is still hard.
Life is very hard.
Bad things happen. And usually when bad things happen, we tend to think I did something wrong. My governance failed me.
And this is where the text offers its most radical reframe, in my opinion. The forge of will.
Parts 6 and 7 of the text, right? Quotes 26, 30, and 32.
Yes.
This section saved me, honestly. It says, will is forged in spirit by spirit.
It brings back the blacksmith archetype again. The text argues that emotion creates challenges specifically to generate purpose.
So the adversity isn't a bug in the system.
It's a feature. It is literally the hammer hitting the metal on the anvil.
So struggle isn't a punishment for bad governance.
No struggle is the resistance required for growth. And this leads to my favorite distinction in the whole text, actually. The difference between idealism and realism.
Oh, yeah. Quote 30. If we perceive life in accordance with purpose, life ceases to be idealistic and becomes realistic.
It flips the standard dictionary definitions entirely. Well, we usually think realists are the cynical ones, and idealists are the dreamers. But Amos says idealism, the expectation of a life without friction, is a fantasy. It's not real.
Right.
Realism is accepting that friction is baked into the design. When you accept that you are currently in the forge, you stop crying about the heat and you start actively shaping the metal.
But that requires a lot of agency from the person. You can't just be passive and wait for the metal to shape itself. Quote 31 says, plant yourself in the garden of your making.
That is the ultimate balance of the philosophy. You acknowledge the divine architect, you honor the ancestors, but at the end of the day, you are the gardener.
You choose the soil.
You choose the soil and you choose what you water. If you water resentment, you grow weeds. If you water purpose, you grow fruit.
All right, let's get to the advanced class here.
Let's do it.
The final section on sovereignty and energy mastery. Quotes 33 and 34. This is where the text starts sounding a lot like quantum mechanics.
He says everything is interchangeable because everything is energy.
Okay, interchangeable energy. That sounds great on a motivational poster, but how does that actually work in real life? Let's say, hypothetically, I get fired from my job.
Okay.
Or I go through a really messy breakup. That energy feels very specific. It feels like ruin. It feels like devastation. How on earth is that interchangeable?
It feels like ruin because of your focus. The text talks about the mind as the great expanse.
The workspace.
Exactly, the workspace. So the event getting fired releases a massive amount of energy into that space. Usually we slap a label on that energy and call it panic.
Right, I would definitely call it panic.
But the sovereign, the person who's actually applying this philosophy, looks at that raw surge of energy and says, okay, this is high voltage.
They strip the label off.
They strip the label entirely. They don't deny that the event happened, but they transmute the emotional charge. Instead of panic, they channel that exact same high intensity into reinvention or determination.
So you're basically using the adrenaline of the disaster to fuel the rebuild of the house.
Precisely. You change the emotion, which changes the focus, which then changes the physical reality. The energy was always interchangeable. You just had to be the alchemist in the room.
That is incredibly powerful, but there's a warning label on this power, isn't there?
There is.
The very last quote in the system, quote 35.
Intent determines consequence. This is the ultimate law of cause and effect.
He distinguishes between a willful request and a desirous request. What's the fundamental difference there?
It comes down to the source of the request. A desirous request comes from the ego. It comes from the unsharpened tool from fear or greed. Like, I want this promotion because I'm terrified of looking like a failure.
It's rooted in lack.
Right. But a willful request comes from that forged, disciplined, modelined spirit we talked about.
And if you make a desirous request anyway, if you just try to manifest strictly from ego,
Then the text says you receive the penalty of instruction.
penalty of instruction, that is such a polite, ancient way of saying you are going to learn the hard way.
It is polite, but notice the deep benevolence in it.
Mm.
It's not called the penalty of damnation.
Right.
It's instruction. Even when you totally mess up, even when your internal governance fails and you act purely out of ego, the consequence is designed to teach you. The universe is just trying to correct your alignment.
So stepping back for a minute, when we look at this whole document, The Philosophy of Asar Amos, it's really a manual for becoming a very specific type of person.
Yes.
The appendix actually describes the author as a philosopher king of energy, which is a mix of architect, blacksmith, and priest.
And it's a call for the reader to become a lighthouse. That's quote 17.
I really love that image of the lighthouse.
It's vital to the whole message. Think about it. A lighthouse doesn't run around the shore frantically trying to save individual boats.
It doesn't jump into the water.
Right. And it doesn't scream at the waves either. It just stands on its rock. It keeps its glass clean, which is the discipline part.
And it keeps its lamp lit, which is the energy.
Exactly. And it just stands there. Its stability is the service it offers to the entire world.
That feels like the exact antidote to the modern world right now. I mean, we are all running around screaming at the waves all day long.
We really are.
And this text is just asking us to find the rock.
Actually, it's asking us to be the rock.
Be the rock. That is a crucial distinction. As we wrap up this deep dive, there's one final provocation from the text that I just can't get out of my head.
The one about death.
Yes. It redefines arguably the scariest thing we know.
It says immortality is simply understanding who and what one is.
And death. Death is just the end of current ignorances.
The end of current ignorances.
That hits so hard. It implies that every single time we learn something deep, a part of our old ignorant self literally dies.
And that is a death we should absolutely welcome.
So the question we want to leave you with today is this. If immortality is truly just understanding who you are and death is just the end of ignorance, what ignorance are you holding on to right now that needs to die so you can truly live?
That is the work right there.
That is the work. Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.